Hey folks, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies. The Constant Show, the whole new set. Check it out, guys. Very happy about this. So it's October, which means Halloween, which means we're doing spooky stuff all month. And I figured we'd start with a horror movie classic, Nightmare on Elm Street. But before that, I want to kind of talk about horror movies in general. So during last week's show, for those of you who watched it, I guess even if you didn't watch it, here's the abridged version. I said at one point that you need bad character decisions in order to make a horror movie. And then I started to think about why are there so many bad character decisions in horror movies? And I realized that it primarily comes down to four reasons. The first is just bad writing, obviously. If my characters have to stay in the haunted house because they're all dumb, well, guess what? My job's done for the day, and I'm calling it there. Number two, it's already happened so frequently that it's almost tropified within the genre. Number three, horror movies owe a lot of their storytelling conventions from the morality tales that came earlier, which is why it's so easy to find examples of anti-heroic or even outright villainous characters in the leading roles in horror movies. A short but wholly incomplete list of horror that feature this: Midnight Meat Train, Shudder, It Follows, the entire Saw series, most of the Leprechaun series, Midsummer, Being John Malkovich, Get Out, Tales from the Crypt. The fourth reason, and the reason that we're all here today, is because when you have a character make a bad character decision, it's easier for you to make the situation more dire. And then I started to think about, could you actually have a good horror movie where the character makes the right decision throughout the course of the movie? And I realized not only could you, but it's already been done. Nancy Thompson began as a conversation that Wes Craven had with his daughter. They were watching a slasher movie, and at one point she looked over at him and she was like, just because she's a girl doesn't mean she has to be clumsy. And then Wes Craven was like, it's genius. Why didn't I think of that? If your memory is a little fuzzy on the Nightmare on Elm Street, the villain of the movie is Freddy Krueger, who's a sleep demon who anytime you fall asleep, he has godlike powers over everything that happens in your dream. If he kills you in your dream, you die for real. So just from the onset, I would say that the style of horror that Nightmare on Elm Street is kind of the inevitable sort. Like, you're eventually going to fall asleep no matter what, and then when you do, he'll be there, and when he's there, he'll just kill you. Most of the time, he doesn't even take people serious. He's just toying with them. Even somebody as monstrous as Jason gets reduced to a crying child. So how does Nancy stack up against somebody who is a monster amongst monsters?
Okay, so take us through a day in the life of the boss.
Nancy can be defined within a single scene. Her and her friend are scared because they hear a noise outside. So Nancy grabs her boyfriend, she kind of hides behind him as he goes to investigate what the source of the problem is. Turns out it's their friend from school, Rod, and Rod is a little crazy, so he pulls a knife on them. When he does, Nancy grabs the knife, retracts it, and then hands it right back to her. This sequence acts as an almost parallel to her relationship with Freddy Krueger. Initially, she succumbs to fear and has to hide behind others, before completely disarming the fear, and then giving the chance to hurt her again. As Nancy's mother puts it, it's in her character to face things, which is something that we'll consistently see. Nancy single-handedly pioneers every single strategy that would ever be used against Freddy. Her interactions with him begin where she's at the slumber party, and she's there to comfort her friend who's having a nightmare. It's this part that allows Nancy to realize that her and her friends are all having nightmares about the same person. Later in the night, Tina gets killed by Freddy Krueger. He's a dream demon who nobody's acknowledging exists, so instead, Rod gets blamed for it. Nancy, despite just that night learning about them all sharing nightmares about the same people, puts together that it's a little conspicuous that she just happened to get murdered right after she made up with Rod, and Nancy is the only one who believes Rod's side of the story that he didn't do it. Nancy realizes she is outmatched here, and her only means of surviving is staying awake. And she devises a bunch of different ways to do that. She drinks a ton of coffee. She decides that she's going to go to school so that way she can stay awake and stay occupied. Whenever she's in school, she passes out. She has a dream where she encounters Freddy. Whenever we see her in the dream, she pretty much walks through. She goes directly past Freddy Krueger, even realizes it's him as she walks past a hall monitor, and he's like, you're in a dream! She's like, whatever, I'm going to the boiler room. And when she gets trapped there by Freddy removing all the doors, Nancy, who has been taking this threat seriously, already comes up with a countermeasure for Freddy. Because if dreams are real, then she can burn herself on a pipe, which would really hurt, which would wake her up. And afterwards, she sees the burn mark on her arm, which validates her belief. So she's used the scientific method to already reassure herself at the beginning of the movie that she's not crazy, she's not hallucinating, there is an actual horror monster after her. Compare this to the heroines of many staple films of the genre, realize they don't do the same thing. All Nancy needed to start taking this threat seriously was they were all having the same nightmare, and that shit doesn't happen. Her next method of staying safe is that she takes a bath, which is, it's kind of an okay idea. It ends up saving her because her splashing in the water prompts her mom to open the door, which is the thing that ultimately wakes her up. Still coming up with countermeasures, still staying awake. After that, she gets more coffee, and then she adds caffeine pills to her diet because she has to stay awake. Nancy, quick on the uptake as always, realizes that she can't keep running forever. She's eventually going to fall asleep, even with all of the countermeasures that she's taken. Because she fell asleep at school, fell asleep in the bath. She realizes that this is a problem. She gets Johnny Depp to guard her while she goes to sleep. He falls asleep on her, so Nancy has to fight all the way through the dream world. She's running up the steps, her feet are sinking in. To get back to her room, when she gets back to her room, she grabs the alarm clock from her dresser drawer and then hits it. This is only the second time that she's met him, and already she has his number. He can't get to her. Also, during this scene, before she even gets to the alarm clock, she has to physically fend him off, as he's a lot more into. If I had claw gloves, you'd be in terror. After this, Nancy goes to the dream study. Whenever she's at the dream study, the psychology intern says that a normal nightmare is between 5 and 6. What Nancy's experiencing is at least 30, and after that, it's breaking the machine. So imagine your worst nightmare, multiply that by 5 or 6, and then imagine that happens every time you go to sleep. You will be exhausted, both mentally and physically. And despite all of that, Nancy is still coming up with plans. She's still making stuff happen, still fighting off Freddy Krueger. Not only that, but during this sequence, whenever she goes into the dream, she takes advantage of the stuff that she's been learning. Dreams are real, you can hurt yourself in a dream, so ergo, you can take something from a dream out of a dream. She steals Freddy Krueger's hat to not only prove to herself that she's sane, but to prove to other people that there's an actual dream demon here. And her mom doesn't believe her, she gives her a lot of pushback, but thanks to Nancy performing this task, thanks to her succeeding in her plan, she looks inside the hat and realizes that it says the name Fred Krueger, which is the thing that prompts her mom to tell her the truth about what actually happened to him a long time ago. Normal horror movie character, you just ask a scientist what happened, and he'll give you the whole rundown. You find some old man by a fish shack or something, and then he'll tell you the entire life story of the person who gave you that cursed videotape. Nancy Thompson, though, she is going around, playing detective, getting answers, about to take down a dream demon. So then Nancy forms her plan, and she's going to take down Freddy Krueger for good. She calls Johnny Depp, and she's like, hey, I'm going to drag him into the real world, and then I'm going to beat his ass. Because Johnny Depp ignores it, he gets murdered in his bed. So Nancy calls her dad and tells him that he's in on the plan now, and he just has to come there and be ready to arrest the guy who's responsible for all of this. And just like any time in this movie that Nancy has a wonderful plan, they completely ignore it. Instead, she goes into the room by herself. Important to note before this, she read a book on booby traps. If that's not impressive to you, I urge you to stay up for a week straight and then read anything. After that, I'm not even reading a condiment bottle. So Nancy goes into the dream world and she's looking for Freddy. Probably the coolest thing I've ever seen a horror movie character do. She walks through her house. She realizes that she's in his lair. She just keeps walking further into the boiler room. She's calling him out, Freddy! Freddy! I've never seen anything like. She straight up intimidated this man. I imagine that somewhere down in his boiler room, Freddy's talking to those two little girls hey, tell her 1, 2, I'm not coming for you. And 3, 4, I don't want any more. And 5, 6, I'm not messing with that bitch. Don't tell her I said that. Went to his turf to call him out for a fight. And when he eventually shows up, she drags him into the real world using the alarm clock on her wristwatch because, hey, Nancy doesn't need any help. After she does that, she just starts Home Alone in him. There's a sledgehammer that falls down. She's got gunpowder and light bulbs. She's just opening can after can on this man. While she's just like beating him like up and down her house, she's also calling out for help to her dad who's across the street. He doesn't come, so she has to just keep going. She lights him on fire and then like kicks him down the stairs. It's bad. He got done dirty. Even after all of this, they think everything's done because Freddy disappeared. Nancy is standing in her mom's bedroom after her mom disappears into the bed. It's a whole thing. So Freddy tries to like sneak up on her, and she doesn't even turn around to face him. She's just like, I regret ever paying attention to you. I regret ever being threatened by you. You're not shit. And then he fades into nothing. So for those keeping track, this is a 16-year-old girl who encountered an omnipotent sleep demon, figured out everything there was to know about this man, beat him in his world, then in her world, and then now is just bullying him into like nothingness. That's moves right there. Freddy was standing there like, she's right though, she's right. And she does all of this without even as much as a power nap the entire time. Tell you what, if I'm gonna fight a sleep demon, I wanna at least be well rested going into it. But it doesn't even end there, because there's more. So Nancy comes back in the third movie so that she can help these kids use their dream powers to beat Freddy inside of a dream. Imagine like just winning a fight against somebody, and then like 3 years later you show up to teach a group of kids how to do it too. She's out here giving tutorials. The only reason that he even gets to her is because she wanted to help these kids out. Because in the third one, we realized that she's a psychology intern. So in between first and third movie, she went to school, graduated, now she's out studying the trade. She's on sleep meds that prevent her from ever having dreams. So not only did she win, the game's over. She isn't even traumatized by the experience. She's just like, yeah, I took him down, graduated, succeeded in life. I didn't even remember him until you had said something about Freddy. So back to that initial question of, do horror movie characters have to make bad decisions in order to have a good horror movie? If you look at Nightmare on Elm Street, despite Nancy's competence, Freddy is like a scary enough threat that you still feel for her. And I think there's an added layer of fear whenever you're watching a movie and then you can't do the, well, if that was me, I would have hid behind the guy so that the giant robot girl didn't turn around and machine gun me in the face. But when you have a character who's hyper competent, who makes all of the decisions that you wish you could, and her situation is still dire, it adds a whole new dimension to that fear. Because Nancy is like best case scenario. 99.9% of us are just gonna be like, you know what, he can kill me, I'm taking that nap. I don't even care. I don't even care at this point. It's been 72 hours, I haven't slept. The cool part about Nancy is that she's grounded. She's not like a commando or some like trained assassin or anything. She's just a girl who's paying attention to the situation and using every resource at her disposal to make things better for herself. You can see the way that her understanding of the situation just sort of transforms with each new piece of information that she gets. From her realizing that they're having the same nightmare, to realizing that the dreams could be real, to utilizing that to escape, to utilizing that to finally take down Freddy. And I think that's a pretty powerful message, that if you do enough of the little things right, then even the truly insurmountable can become achievable. As long as you're like Nancy, and you don't trip. Because just because she's a girl doesn't mean she has to be clumsy. But that's my thoughts. Nightmare on Elm Street, my favorite Scream Queen. And what are your thoughts? Do you like Nightmare on Elm Street? Who's your favorite horror heroine? If you guys will excuse me, I am very tired.